My name is Victor Frank Erdelac, and I was born in Gary, Indiana, 7/5/22. I know very little of my early life because I lost my mother when I was like 2 or 3, and I was raised by grandmothers, aunts, various people. And until I was about 8 or 9, I had various relatives that were taking care of me. As a young boy, I was always very interested in aviation, and whenever I could sneak away, I would get to a little airfield in the outskirts of town and watch the pilots. When I graduated from high school, I wanted to learn to fly, and I wasn't able to afford flying lessons or anything, so I joined the Army Air Corps. Once I enlisted, I applied for flight school and found out that this was pre-war, and in order to get into the flight school you had to have a college degree or some college credits. So I was shipped off to a technical high school where I learned all about bombs, machine guns, small cannons, anything to arm a airplane for combat. It was a very interesting school, and I learned a lot, and I did very well in the school. And about 3 days after I graduated from the school, war was declared, and we were involved in the World War II. Then I was shipped to Spokane, Washington, where I was assigned to the 29th Reconnaissance Squadron. And their job was to patrol the Pacific Ocean off the coast of state of Washington, looking for enemy submarines. After a couple of months, the squadron got shipped to Arizona, where it was broken up into small cadres, and I was shipped back to Spokane, Washington with one of the cadres, and we were given the orders to create a bomb group that was going to be called the 301st Bomb Group Heavy. We were issued B17 bombers, and also we began to receive recruits that had been drafted because the draft was in effect at that time, and the only thing that they had been taught was basic military training. And we, the remnants of the 29th Squadron, became instructors, and we were to teach them their jobs that they had been assigned to. And we continued to build the bomb group. After about a year of training and shipping around from winters up north and the torrential summers of the southern areas around Arizona and New Mexico, we finally were separated from our air crews, and the ground crews were shipped to Fort Dix, New Jersey. After a short stay there, we were put on a boat, joined a convoy, and a couple of months later ended up at a airfield about 60 miles north of London, England. Shortly after that, our bomb crews arrived, and we became a 301st Bomb Group, active heavy bomb group. After a couple of weeks of instruction from the British, who had been involved in this war for almost 2 years, one morning we loaded our planes with bombs and ammunition, and the air crews took off and bombed German occupied territory in France. We were the first American bombers, along with our sister group, the 97th Bomb Group, to hit England and drop bombs on enemy territory. Now, I don't remember if I read about it or heard about it, but Paul Tibbets, who was a captain then, was supposedly the lead pilot on the very first mission. After we had been in England for a while, more bomb groups began to arrive in England, and England became the base for the 8th Air Force. Along about October, the 97th and the 301st Bomb Group, being considered the senior groups or the most experienced groups, we were loaded on a boat, joined a convoy, and headed for the invasion of North Africa. Invasion took place, and soon they had acquired a French airfield, and we got off our boat and took occupation on the airfield. And shortly after that, our Air Force arrived, and we became an active bomb group. Now, the Mediterranean area was occupied by Germans and Italians, along with the islands of Sicily, from the toe of Italy all the way up north to the southern shores of France, were occupied by Germans and Italians. And Field Marshal Rommel, the tank commander of the German army, was fighting the British 8th Army in the Libyan desert at that time. And Rommel had supply depots at 5 areas along the North African coast, at Tunis, Sousse, Sfax, Benghazi, and Cairo. And our job at that time was to prevent supplies from reaching these depots. We would bomb targets around the Mediterranean area, the islands of Sicily, and the toe of Italy, all the way up as far as southern France. Sometime in March, we received our first replacement airplane. And the colonel came by and was looking for volunteers to become gunners on that plane, because we had not been receiving replacement crews at that time. And so I volunteered to be a waist gunner. And on April the 6th of 1943, our mission was to seek a German convoy that was carrying ammunition and supply and fuel to the depot at Tunis. So our bomb group, the 301st Bomb Group, 14 planes took off and climbed to our usual bombing altitude of 25,000 feet. And we searched for the convoy for about 3 hours through scattered and broken clouds and couldn't find a target. So the pilot decided to drop below the cloud line, and we came out at about 14,000 feet, almost directly over the convoy we were looking for. In spite of intense anti-aircraft damage to our planes, and from the shore batteries at Tunis, we completely destroyed the convoy. And in spite of heavy damage to our planes, we did not lose a single plane. And there were some minor injuries. However, we did not have a fatality on any of the crews. When we had taken off, we were advised to be especially alert because we had a guest passenger on board. When we got back to our base, we were introduced to Margaret Burke White, who was the staff photographer for Life magazines. And she took pictures of the bombing of the convoy, and the pictures appeared in Life magazine later that month. When we asked Margaret Burke White how she managed to get a passage on our bomb crew mission, she said she had to do an awful lot of talking to a lot of people, and was finally admitted permission from General Jimmy Doolittle, who was on the Tokyo raid a year before. And Margaret Burke White was the first lady to ever fly a combat mission. The hat has a story. When I came back from my 50 mission tour overseas, I was assigned to a training corps and was based at Casper, Wyoming. And I became a instructor gunner on B-24s. And I immediately applied for application to pilot training. And every month I would go up to check and see how the application was coming along, and I kept getting the story that the application had been filled, and but a new application was coming up. Well, that happened for 14 months. And finally one day, I was coming down from a training mission, and a captain hollered, "Erdelac, what are you doing here? Why aren't you an OCS?" And I told him my story. 3 days later, I was on a train headed for Texas. After 3 days of different tests, there was a written test, a physical test, and a psycho test. I was admitted to the other side of the road, they call it, into cadets. That's where the work began. Each week we had a program to go through. And when we came to the math program, it was all college math. And not having been to college, I knew that I was going to fail. But ironically, I was in a barracks with a bunch of college kids that had been drafted, and they had taken a shine to me because I had been overseas, and they were always asking me about stories from overseas. And when I told them that I did not have any math training, they said, "Don't worry about it. We'll get you through. We'll get you through." They worked with me every evening after the evening meal until lights out, and believe it or not, I passed the exam. I worked my way all the way through cadets, and I made the application for the 5 qualities: pilot training, navigation, bombardier, engineering, and one other program that was available. But pilot training was first, so I was assigned to a B-25 school in Texas. I was there for a month. The war in Europe came to a close, and the B-25 school was closed. So I decided to take my discharge on my point system and became a civilian after that. Things in this box, there are some collection of pads that I found interesting, that I collected from. They were military pads worn by ground troops, really, that I always felt sorry for, because flying, to me, I was way above the ground problems that were going on, and I had a chance. If we were hit, I had a parachute that I could bail out with, and I had like a better chance of getting through than the guys on the ground did. And the Army troops on the floor, on the ground, and the Marines were 2 of the groups that I always felt sorriest for, because they had the toughest job. And other than that, that's all I've got in this box that I remember that I had any reason for collecting. Back to the story about the hat. In the Air Force, there was a metal ring in the hat, but once the hat was worn in combat, the metal ring was taken out and it became a crushed hat. And that was significant of any pilot or navigator or bombardier who had been in combat. He wore the crushed hat. So that's how that story came about. So whenever you saw an officer with a crushed hat, you knew that he had been through the war.
You've been to a number of reunions, and you are part of this Veterans Association?
Yes.
This Veterans Association here?
Yes.
You'd mentioned that.
Yes.
Now, of your air crew, the Orchid Boys, Was that one of your first groups?
When I signed up as a gunner, I signed up on the lead ship of the group. Every mission I flew was in the lead ship. And enemy pilots would go after the lead ship because they always figured there was high rank leading the group. So we saw quite a bit of action from enemy fighters that way. After the war, I don't know how it came about, but someone decided that there should be a book published about the 301st Bomb Group. So they hired a professor, I can't remember his name, and he was to do the research of the 301st and compile a book. And it came out as this issue. And everybody in the group that wanted to buy one of the books, his name was embroidered in gold on the book. So this book has the history of the 301st Bomb Group, and I'm one of the original members that created the bomb group, and the entire history and a lot of our combat pictures and stuff is in this book. So it's quite valuable. Well, when I joined the Air Corps, and that's what it was called at that time, it wasn't the Air Force. Air Force didn't come into effect until 1947. Previous to that, it was called the Army Air Corps, and we were Army members. What else can I say about that? We were actually members of the Army, same as the ground troops, and became separated from the Army in 1947 after the war. I don't know how I had been contacted by someone about the honor flight, but I think it was the third flight out of Chicago. And I remember May 23rd being a date of the honor flight. And we took off from Chicago. We met at a set up location, and we had coffee and donuts and some chit chat, and met with the other veterans that were going to go on the flight. And we took off and landed at, I can't remember the field, in New York. And then took a bus tour of the, that was when the World War II veterans exhibit had just opened up, and they hadn't been able to flood the pond yet, so there was no pond. But they took us on a tour of the all the different stations around the pond that were set up for different groups that had taken place in World War II, and all the air forces that were there. They took us to the Vietnam Wall. They took us to the Lincoln Memorial. Oh my, there were so many different, they took us to the replica of the flag raising on Mount Suribachi. There were so many exhibits that I can't remember them all. We went through the Air Force Museum. Anyhow, we had lunch. We had entertainment. And they flew us back to Chicago. Yeah, when we got back to Chicago, the fire department was there, and the plane, as it was coming in, was showered with a arch of water from the fire department. And then the police department escorted us in, and then when we unloaded and got inside, it was unbelievable that the crowd that was there, because when we were scheduled to leave New York, our flight was delayed because of a storm. And so when we got in to Chicago, it was after midnight, and I thought there would be nobody there. It was it was unbelievable, the amount of people that stayed to welcome us. And we walked down a parade of people on both sides that were unbelievable, including family. Anyhow, the flight itself was something that you never forget. And the way you were treated by the people. Each veteran, as he got off the plane, had an escort and walked you through the aisles to meet all the people. I keep thinking of all the people that stayed after midnight to be there to greet us. That, to me, was the believing mark of what people thought of us. Okay, break.
Well, I want to say thank you for your service. And thank you for your patriotism.
Well, you know, it's hard to believe that all this happened. You know, since I retired, and Diane has been a prince, time has just flown by. I can't believe I'm at this age this quick.
Yeah, just July 5th, you're going to be 100.
It's unbelievable. I just can't believe that I've been through all this. And it's like
Like a dream.
it just started.
Yeah.
And here we are at
Yeah.
twilight.
Yeah.
And there's been so much going on lately. They are paying so much more attention to veterans anymore.
Well, they need to.
I go downtown. I wear my veterans hat when we go shopping. And people open doors. My cane falls on the floor. Someone picks it up. They hold doors open for you. They congratulate you and stuff like that. It's hard to take.
Well, you deserve it because you guys were amazing, absolutely amazing.
Well, you know, I always thought I was thrown into this by accident. I mean, here I went and enlisted before the war, not knowing there was going to be a war. And this came about. I became a part of it. Like I was just accidentally thrown into all this, which I kind of believe I was. It was just something that came along, and they needed bodies, and you got chosen. You got thrown into the mess. And I was one of the very, 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 very fortunate. I came out without a Purple Heart.
Your service is amazing, and the way you can, recollect everything. I remember at our DAR event where we
Yeah.
first met,
Yes.
you talking about your service experience and how you saved the pins from every bomb that you dropped.
Yes. Yes.
And what I'm amazed with and so thankful for that, like you said, you were the lead plane in those missions, which you were a prime target for the Luftwaffe. It's amazing you made it through there unscathed.
There are so many side stories to that too, like I can't remember the mission we were on, but 9 o'clock, we go by the clock.
Mm-hmm.
9 o'clock, just above level, was a P-38. And we were in our target area. And we were so far away from our base where P-38s normally hang out or were based. I knew that it was, if it was one of ours, it was way, way out of its range. So I called the pilot and I told him, we've got a desert-colored P-38 on our left at 9 o'clock. And I says, he's too far from his base. Well, he says, keep an eye on it. The minute he said that, that plane kept flashing his American insignias, and that's what they were supposed to do, indicating he wanted to slide it in for cover. He did that one time, and then he turned and came in firing. His cannon shells went over the top of us and hit our wingman, and there was an explosion in the cockpit, and that plane went over the top of us and down like that.
Okay.
And I remember the ball turret man saying he saw 2 parachutes.
So the whole crew didn't get out.
So far as we heard, there were 2 apparently were captured, and that was it, because we were still in enemy territory.
So they disguised an enemy aircraft as an American.
They apparently a plane that had been shot down, they disguised it and used it as a decoy.
Sneaky bastards, weren't they?
There was another occasion when a B-17 was high at between 5 and 6 o'clock, very high. And he kept doing this here, asking for permission to join us. And he had American signals and everything on it. And he flew in and became part of the group. And he was just off of our right wing. And all the ports were closed. The guns were in stowed position and everything, and we were still in combat area, and our guns were active. So I had my waist gun on the pilot's head, and that might have been the day that when our wingman got shot down. I don't know. But anyhow, he was right close enough that I had the gun on him. And everything was closed. And I knew they had to have a camera somewhere taking pictures of us. And if he was going to do anything or make any active danger, he was gone. All at once, he just peeled off and left. So we know that was another German.
Another German.
Yeah.
Boy, they're sneaky.
Then there's stories about the bombs. One mission, we had not reached the target yet, and the upper turret gunner called me and said, "Vic, there's a terrible noise in the bomb bay." And I was the only mobile person on the plane. Your navigator and bombardiers were up north, or up to the nose. Pilots and navigator in their position. The radio man was in his position. Your ball turret gunner was locked in a turret. Tail gunner was in a turret. The upper gunner was in a turret. And I was the only mobile person on the plane. If anything that had to be attended to, that could be, I was the one to do it. So when the bombardier, or the upper turret, called me and said there was a noise in the bomb bay, I took an oxygen bottle and strapped it to my leg, disconnected, and I went up to the bomb bay. And that day we had been carrying what they call personnel bombs. They were 6 20-pound bombs wired to a steel rod, or a steel tube. In the tube, there was a .38 caliber bullet with a spring load behind it and a wire preventing the spring load from going forward. When the bomb is dropped, that wire comes out, the bomb spring load hits the back of the bullet clips the wires, and the bombs are free to explode, and they're on their way down. We don't know what happened, but somehow the wire came loose through vibration or something. The wire must have vibrated loose. The bullet went off, clipped the wiring on the tube, and the bombs fell on the floor. They still had the propeller on the nose. Had they opened the bomb bay doors, the wind would have hit them and they would explode immediately. I had to pick each bomb up. First I called the bombardier and I told him, "Don't open the bomb bay door." I explained to the pilot what had happened. I also called the radio operator to stand by, and I called the ball turret guy up. We were going to make a tour. So I went down to the bomb bay, reached down, picked up each bomb, held my hand on the spinner, handed it to the radio operator. He handed it to the ball turret man to throw out the window. And we got rid of 6 bombs. We were all awarded, or was supposed to be awarded, the DFC, Distinguished Flying Cross, for that operation. There was another case where the lower bomb, and we were carrying 500-pound bombs, and the operator, the upper turret again called me and said there was a terrible noise. Well, we could feel the vibration in the airplane and knew something had happened. So I went forward to the bomb bay, and the lower bomb was hanging sideways on the shackle. The other bombs had hit that bomb and gone out when we dropped bombs. Now we're still in the target area, and I went forward and I had to get a screwdriver and unloose that shackle to drop that bomb. We had to move out of the formation in order so we wouldn't hit another airplane with it, because it was live. It would have blown up when it hit another airplane. So we were supposedly supposed to get a Distinguished Flying Cross. On our 47th mission, we were informed that General Hap Arnold decided to abolish the DFC because there were too many being given out. So we were never awarded the DFC for that. And today I still haven't received it. And I have searched for 3 years trying to override Hap Arnold. And my final letter was from the woman who is now head of the Air Force. With a final, she said, this is the final letter you will receive. There is no more research going on. Your application is denied. That's the end of that story. Right, it was like I was home, but I wasn't home. It was like nobody recognized me or made any issue about what I had been through or anything like that. There was no accolades, no glad you're home or anything like that. Just like for 4 years, life was suspended. You went from one to the other on an even keel. There was no big issue about anything. When I went down and got my pilot's license, it was no big deal. It was just life went on, that's all. There was no recognition for anything. Then when Vietnam came along, that's when I became incensed. These kids being sent over there for nothing. I mean, we didn't belong there. And I felt sorry for them. I felt sorry for the Marines, because the Marines were Air Force, Ground Force, and Navy, all in one package. And they got shoved into anything that was happening anywhere in the world. And a lot of needless lives were lost. And that's about when I began to think about things a little bit. I don't know. Just it's hard to figure out. When we came home, it was like nothing happened. Yeah. The veterans didn't want to talk. They didn't, there was no pleasure in talking about the war. I mean, who wants to know about somebody being blown apart or every time a plane went down, I lost 9 friends. Diane, she knows about some of the fun things that happened. The bad things I've kept away from her. There's a box in the garage with letters from home that I saved, from girlfriends. My class, what did they call it? Feathers from home or something. They asked for your, if anybody had received a letter from overseas, let this group know. And they in turn would write letters to, and I received a lot of letters from classmates that I had never contacted, and I wondered how they got a hold of my address and stuff like that. But it was a group of girls that got together and decided to write letters to classmates. And I've got a box full of that stuff in the garage. And a lot of them are very interesting. But they're keepsakes.
Yep.
Yeah.
Yep. Well, you've celebrated 50 years with your bride, right?
Yes.
50 years. And then now you've got your 100th birthday coming up July 5th. You got any big plans for your birthday?
Our big plans, yeah, we've talked about it. Our big plans is for us, just the two of us, to disappear somewhere.
Private folks. What do you want for your birthday, Mick?
Peace, quiet.
Thank you.
Yeah. I don't want people to buy presents and stuff. There's nothing I need. She can't find enough closet space for all my jackets and whatever I've gotten in the past, stuff that I haven't even worn yet. And I don't need clothes. There's nothing that I need. The VA just furnishes me with all the medication I need, and they've been marvelous. I've always been interested in crafts. Even as a little boy, I used to do things with acorns and whatever I could find to make something out of. So anyhow, after I retired, I had always been interested in seeing what people do with wood. And well, even before that, I used to draw, and I learned to paint and stuff like that. But then when I retired, I went to a wood carving show and saw I couldn't believe what some of these people were doing with wood. And so I got really fired up and I joined a wood carving club. And a wood carving club is a strange bunch of people because I sat there for about 3 weeks trying to whittle. And I don't remember what I was even trying to whittle on, but I did not ask any questions of anybody and nobody bothered me. Finally one day, I must have asked somebody something and there was a flood of information immediately from everybody in the club. That started me then, and I learned right away how to handle a knife, what kind of knives to get. And one of the first things that I learned was, in order to become a wood carver, start out by making a knife. So I did. I found out what you had to have to make a knife blade with, and I knew some fellas that worked in the steel mill, and I asked them if they could get me certain steels. And I learned how to grind that down, and I've eventually made my first carving knife. And I made some since then, and I bought a few. But that was the beginning, and then I kept carving, and being retired, I had time to spend at carving. And that's when I told you that I had painted portraits before, and I wanted to learn how to carve faces. So I taught myself to carve faces, and eventually I became an instructor in teaching people to carve faces, because faces is one of the hardest things for wood carvers to do. And all my wood carvings came out of my own thoughts. I tried carving from samples and stuff, and I found it very difficult to do. So I just carved out of imagination things that came out of my head. So the carvings that you will see, and there must be, I don't know, I have no idea how many, 50, maybe more in this house. They're all originals. And the only time that I have duplicated anything near what I had previously carved, our doctor was a very close friend. And one day I decided, I asked him if he was liked comedy or anything like that. And he says, oh yeah, he did. So I carved a doctor. And the doctor is animated. Everything I do, I carve, has a little story to it. It's sort of it tells its own story. Anyhow, I did the doctor, and I gave it to him, and he was thrilled with it. So I liked it so much, I made a carving exactly like it that I have, that I kept. So anyhow, that everything else is original. And I did canes. This one I did for my father-in-law. I had done a cane for him because he came to the point where he needed a cane, and I made him a cane that he used. And he was in a store one day, and he parked the cane to look at some stuff, and then he went back for the cane that was missing. Well, it got lost. Eventually somebody found it and liked it and kept it. So I made him another one. And this one right here has his name on it and everything. And one day I saw him walking with a store cane. And I said, well, didn't you like the cane? Oh, yeah. He says, I liked it so much, I was afraid to use it. Somebody would steal it. So eventually, he passed away, and I inherited his cane. So this is one of the canes that I made for somebody. I did sell a few things, but only enough to perpetuate my carving expense. Like I bought some carving books and some carving knives and stuff, and the few things that I sold paid for all that. I never made any money off of carving, really. I did it because I loved carving. So that's my story on carving. When I enlisted and I completed my technical training, I had a 19-day pass before I had to report to my next place of that I was to go to. Well, war came along, all passes were canceled immediately, and I went on to my assignments, and I didn't get home for another 2.5 years. When I came home, the rationing of gas was on, and people were issued coupons for various things, fuel, gas being one of them. And I had a brother, an older brother, who was too old to be drafted, and he let me use his car, and I had to use his gas coupons to get around. And there was a gas station owned by an old fella that I used to work at his station once in a while, and he was so intense about the way the veterans coming home were being treated, that somehow he managed to get some free coupons for gas, and he gave them to me so I could use to get around with the car. So I remember that part, and I do remember hearing about butter being rationed, various things being rationed, and because of the war effort. Of course, when I got home, I don't remember too much about rationing. I remember the rations being lifted, and there didn't seem to be too much of a problem anymore as far as food and gas and so forth. I remember gas at one time was like 16, 18 cents a gallon, opposed to today's $5, $6, $7 a gallon. Difficult.
Yes, it is. Yes, it is.
Mm-hmm.
Well, sir, again, I really got to tell you that I appreciate your service. It has been a pleasure. This has been a memorable occasion for me and an honor to be able to film this. And I hope that we can all do our part in saving history and telling the younger generation about the sacrifices that were made by you and your fellow veterans and everyone during the war that have done everything to help keep us free, and that these youngsters and younger people hopefully will start to realize the sacrifices that were made to get us to where we are today. We can get back to that type of thinking again, I hope. So, again, I do appreciate the time that you've spent with me today. This has been an experience for me.
Well, George, may I say likewise. It's been very interesting meeting you, and someone that I will remember. And the job that you are doing, how much I appreciate what you're doing, and how much of what you're doing is being saved for future generations.
It's an honor. It's an honor.
This is my flag. I fought for it. I saw friends die for it. My brother, without reservation, gave his life for it. This is my flag. I have seen it degraded and desecrated by those who owe their very existence to it. I have seen it torn and shredded and burned without conscience. This is my flag. It has furled its stripes in wars at home and abroad. It has saved the lives of countless numbers who have taken its presence for granted. This is my flag. There are those who would hide behind its protective mantle and call themselves Americans. There are those that would avail themselves of all the rights and privileges that it guarantees, yet slander its heritage. This is my flag. I have seen no flag in the world that has mothered its population in a more loving, caring, thoughtful, considerate, and righteous way. It guarantees you the right to agree or dissent without fear of retribution. This is my flag. I would advise those who have evil intent not to challenge its resolve. It stands mighty and proud against the background of an ominous sky. This is my flag. Even as a very young person, I learned of its honor and glory, of those long ago who gave so very much that future generations might enjoy the harvest of liberty and happiness that is only the hope and dream of so many. Yes, I am proud and very thankful that this is my flag.